So have you ever seen this guy here in the boat? Well, that guy there is probably one of the most important characters in all of mythology. Stick around and I'll introduce you. Welcome back, wayward children, to my humble hovel. Let's get you back in touch with your roots, shall we? Manannan mac Lir, or Mannan mac Lir, is the Irish god of the sea and the dead. Or at least that's what you'll get at face value. There are literally hundreds of stories all throughout Western Europe that regard Manannan mac Lir. And the legends and mythologies of his feats and adventures stretch all the way from Iceland to India. And the mythologies and legends of his feats stretch all the way from Iceland to India. And while I would love to go over them all, there are so many, so we're just gonna go over a few of note if you don't mind. So, mac Lir, the primordial god of the sea. Let's dial back first and talk about the name. Manannan mac Lir, or Mannan mac Lir, means little Manannan, son of Lir. So Lir, L-E-R, is the primordial god of the sea. Manannan mac Lir is his son. Now Lir, L-E-R or L-E-I-R, is the primordial god who eventually becomes a dragon. We'll get back to that story in a bit. But Mannan, or Manannan, is the son, and outside of the context of him being the son of Lir, we don't ever really hear about Daddy Lir anywhere else in the mythologies. So this is the one area where I'm going to go a little bit off from what you can find in books and in the regular mythologies from all over. In the Drega mythology, the mythology of my family's clan, the Sean Key and the Drega, Manannan is not the son of Lir, but he is in fact the avatar of Lir. So Lir is a primordial god, meaning that he doesn't necessarily have a physical form, or that his physical form is much too large to be contained within what we would see as being a human body. Now, in our mythologies, he is a Fomorian. Now, the Fomorians are the inhabitants of Ireland before the Tuatha De Dannan, or the tribe of Danu, arrived there. Now, there are 4 or 5 groups of people who throughout the books of invasions landed in Ireland, and the Fomorians are believed to be the very first ones after the Great Flood, or what we would know in science as being the end of the Younger Dryas period. So when we talk about Manannan, or Mannan, Little Lir, we are in fact talking about the avatar of Lir, who is the more or less human embodiment or human visage of the power of that primordial sea god. Alright, now back to the shit you can find in the books. So Manannan, or Mannan, is the guy who essentially made everything, from weapons to ships to places, and he is responsible for either making them himself or teaching somebody else to make them. He's even had a little bit of influence on the dwarves of Norway and even the Allfather himself. Now, I'm going to get to the ties to Norse mythology in just a minute, but first I want to finish talking about the Gaelic myths where Manannan appears. Now, there's a huge, incredible story called Manannan's Treasure, and it refers to the bundle of weapons that Manannan created for the Tuatha De Dannan and the Fomorians. He was not sided with one or the other, but rather one who was trying to bring balance and peace between the two, and would teach and provide knowledge as well as weaponry and martial training to both sides throughout the myths in order to maintain balance and equality amongst the two groups. But with the exception of a very, very few items like the Dagda's club or his harp, most magical items that we hear of and know of in Gaelic mythology came from Manannan. Now, about a week ago I did a video on Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, and I mentioned in there a cauldron. Now, this cauldron is an inspiration for a lot of different mythologies, and it is essentially the cauldron of life. Now, you may remember a film called The Sword in the Stone. The Sword in the Stone took that inspiration from that Welsh or Manx myth and sort of ran with it. But that cauldron also inspired the Arthurian myth of the Holy Grail. And that cauldron, as we know, was forged and made by Manannan, but it was also the property and guardianship of the son of Manannan. I'm going to save all of the magical items that Manannan has made for a Manannan's Treasure video, which will either be out this week or next week. So subscribe if you do want to see that here in the tavern. But for now, we're going to mention very briefly a couple of the things that he made and that he was well known for. Now, Manannan is considered to be the guardian of Wales, as well as considered to be the guardian of Ireland. Now, when we start talking about where this dips into the myths, the crossovers between the dragon that Lair would eventually become, which is Sturworm, and the different mythologies surrounding Manannan himself. Now, this photo I have up behind me, and I'll put it up here as well, shows him standing in in the bow of a ship. Now, that ship was one that he also made, and it was a self-powered ship. It would move on its own at the will of Manannan. You may recognize that as being similar to a vessel given to the son of Njordr, or you may know his name. I don't know why I call him the son of Njordr, but the son of Njordr, Freyr, or Freyr. You may recognize the mythology of a ship that drives itself and is always favored by the winds from another story from Norse mythology, the story of the ship of the son of Njordr, Freyr. Now, again, we're going to go into all of those magical items in an entirely different video. And I know all of my Norse friends out there are going to be upset that I am again conflating Gaelic and Norse mythology. You guys are just going to have to get over it. My family has combinations of both of these mythologies built into our family. If you want the mainline stuff, there are plenty of books on it, and I won't have my feelings hurt if you want to go and read the less interesting stories. Now, one of the most commonly circulated myths around Manannan is the mists of Manannan. Now, there is a huge mist front that forms around the cliffs and the edges of Ireland during storms and in early mornings. Now, to the ancient Gaels and Celts, they believed this to be, and it's not just Ireland, but as well as Scotland and in Wales, and a lot of early warrior groups had to learn to fight in these mists and navigate through them while traveling. So it did give them advantages in battles on their home field because they knew the terrains and they could easily navigate through them to fight people who were not well versed in fighting in these dense mists. And those mists were believed to be the work of Manannan, defending the isle to confuse enemies. And in the mythology, there are plenty of examples of him using this mist to not only confuse enemies and keep them away from the islands, but as well to send the ships down to the bottom of the ocean. And in the legend of Sturworm, we see two parts. One, we see him depicted as a monster that would eat the ships of fishermen that were just off of the shore, as well as his yawns, putting to sleep anyone on the coasts of Cork, as well as anyone on the coastal areas on that side of Ireland in general. Though those legends are primarily around the Munster area of Ireland, they are fairly well widespread throughout Wales and throughout the whole of Ireland, but their primary source of survival is in that area. There are also tales of that very same sea dragon defending the rivers as well as defending the coasts of Ireland from impending invaders. Both the mythological kind by way of the Tuatha De Dannan, the Sturworm being on the side of the Fomorians and fighting off the Tuatha De, as well as fighting off real-world enemies in the form of the English and the Danish. Now, Manannan is seen as having a wild boar that he sometimes rides into battle, and you may recognize that as boars are a very common staple amongst Norse gods, both in the Aesir and in the Vanir, particularly in the downline of the father god of the Vanir, Njordr. But in many of the mythologies, Odin is also seen as being associated with the boar. Now, this is going to be something that is going to be very controversial, and again, we're getting off of the books, but by our mythology, Tyr is also an avatar, or at least in some way a avatar of Leir, the primordial sea god. So Manannan, Maclir, and Tyr, the god of war, the god of justice in Norse mythology, they are not the same, but they have the same power. They come from the same source, and their entire purpose is to bring balance and justice. And if you read the tales of both of them, they are overwhelmingly similar in what their purpose was amongst the group that they were in. If you did enjoy, I always love seeing that like bar tick 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 up, and it lets me know that you guys are enjoying the content. Any questions you have or videos that you would like to see, you can always leave them in the kilt section down below, where you will also find links to all of my podcasts, purchasables, and platforms, as well as any relevant links to any things I talk about in these videos. And if you would like to join the clan and have not already, you can do so by engaging the subscribe button in Mortal Kombat, and you will know you have won when all the blood drains from its body and it becomes a deathly grey. And conveniently located to its right is the victory bell, which you can ring to let all know of your victory over the subscribe button. And as a bonus, you will also always know when I upload a video. Thank you all so much for joining me. Until next time, warriors, heroes, and adventurers, stay bloodthirsty, my friends, and remember, all hail.